Well, people have asked me, and I'll tell you right now, that I am not Jared's mom, but Jared is my son. Don't you like the way I put that? Yeah. Yes, he is on your time of grace, and that Jared is my son. All right. I probably can't speak like he can, but, you know, maybe inherited just a tiny little bit. I don't know. I woke up this morning, and then I looked in the mirror, and I thought, when did my mother start to live with us? And then I thought to myself, all these young people are taking selfies of themselves. And I'm thinking, I want to have the same picture in my mind that I had like when I was 35. And I am not taking a selfie. You know, you just like to have that young set in your mind. You look in the mirror and you realize, wow, where did that happen? All right. Today, you know, when Paula first called me and said, maybe she texted me. No, maybe she emailed me. But one of those things. She wanted to know if I would do this. And I thought, oh, what happens is God gives you all this material from the time they ask you until it happens. And I want to tell you, at the beginning of this week, I said to God, stop! I have enough material! This week was an adventure in itself, but I'm just saying, these things happen, and all the speakers that you've had probably have experienced the same thing. God gives you material to talk about, and some of it you welcome, and some you wish you had never had the opportunity. All right. Today we're going to talk about testing, and that's basically what that first verse says. I think your sheet is the golden rod. And yes, ladies, yes. I promise when it is time to eat, you will eat. Okay? I promise. Okay. So when we look at that first verse, actually, I'm not going to sing it because I just told a lady what happens, and those of you that are a little bit older know this. The older you get, the more your voice goes away. And you can't sing as beautifully as you could when you were 35. In fact, nobody wants to hear you sing because first you're up here and then you're tenor. And then you don't know what you are. You sound like a young teenage boy with their voice cracking. So I'm going to try to talk as normal as possible. All right, by looking at that first verse, second verse actually, where it says, teach, Lord, and I want you to, I'm emphasizing the word teach. And yes, you don't have to be in school in order to be taught something. And let's read that together. Can you sing it? I can. Okay. Begin, right?
Teach us, Lord, full obedience, holy reverence, true humility. Test our thoughts and our attitudes in the radiance of your purity. Cause our faith to rise, cause our eyes to see your majestic love and authority. Words of power that can never fail, let their truth prevail over unbelief.
Thank you. Well, in this second verse, we emphasize speak, Lord. The songwriter emphasizes teaching, followed by obeying, and revere or respect and humility. So how might this be done? He says, test our thoughts and our attitudes. So increase our faith. and help us to see your words have power and are true. So, tests. I hate tests, actually. I do. I've had a few tests in my lifetime. I've had medical tests, hearing tests, eyesight, driver's tests, ability tests, achievement tests, personality tests. When you get to be my age, you've had a number of tests. But at this age, it's kind of like, well, what's going to come back from the mammogram, and what's the DEXA scan going to say, and what's the blood test going to say? Is it going to be over 100 glucose or not? And what is my HDL? And so you're like, so that's the kind of test that I'm talking about. But our past experiences with things always affect the present. So I sometimes ask the Lord some questions about that. Like, will I be able to retake this test? Would I just keep the part of the test that I passed and then just do the rest? What about, she has an easy test. Why don't you give me her test? It's so much easier, and I know all the answers to that one. No, that isn't going to happen. So, what does the songwriter say? The songwriter says that God will test our thoughts and our attitudes. That's kind of scary because it's inside of us, not outside of us. Can't be taken off and changed. Like this morning, I had to go on cuddle duck because I had a nice spring top and it's cold outside. So anyway, getting back to, so what actually does God test? And on your sheet, I put the verse where we say in Psalm 26:2, what? Test me, Lord, try me, examine my heart and my mind. That's what he's going to do. He's going to test us, he's going to try us, and he's going to examine. Okay, what is he going to examine? He is going to examine my heart. Well, that's my emotions, my lust, my desires. All of those things are in what we consider to be the heart. Just go with me here. And the mind would be like your intellect. And to me, the soul is in there too, because did not our Lord Jesus say to us, I say to the disciples, when he summed up the 10 Commandments, that the first and foremost is to love the Lord with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. So this is what he's testing. All of us. Every single bit of us. So he's testing our heart and our mind. So when does he do this? Well, he said this to Job. What is mankind that you make so much of them? That you give them so much attention? That you examine them every morning and test every moment? Well, we're used to scheduling, aren't we? Yeah. Maybe you wake up and you don't feel well and you're thinking to yourself, hey, I think I should see the doctor. So you want to see the doctor that afternoon and within 2 hours or whatever it might be, so you call and you schedule an appointment. Now, some appointments might be next week, end of the week, in a couple weeks, 6 months, right? Dental, yearly checkup. So we like to be scheduled. We like to kind of know when it's happening, all right? But God tells us through Job, it happens, he examines us every morning and he tests us every moment. So that means he tests us at the start of the day and every breathing moment we have. So like all of the time. In fact, it's more than every breathing moment because there are more moments between breaths, right? So he is constantly testing us. To the point when Job made this remark, he said, don't you ever look away from us or leave me alone for even an instant? But isn't that refreshing to know that God completely and then totally encompasses us all of the time? So that means in our good moments and in our bad moments. So we know that He's going to test us. We know when He's going to test us. Now we're going to ask ourselves, what kind of test is He going to give us? Well, this is the part that I want you to jot down some tests that you might have had. You can use just a word if you want to. It might be, you might say health. You might say marriage. You might say children. You might say parents. You might say work, peers, friends. Am I missing some things? Let's see. Or your singleness. Maybe you're tired of that. So, what areas has God tested you? Just put down a word. This is just for your self-reflection as we go through this. Now, if you tell me you can't think of anything, we have got a big problem. Well, when God tests us in these things, have you all got at least one thing down, maybe? Okay. When God tests us, there are things that are affected by that test. Okay, our surroundings, our environment, our past experiences, our relationships, our physical age, and our spiritual age, which, by the way, is not the same. So, how does He use testing when we're talking about environment and things like that that are going on with us? Well, He tests us, for example, one of the things that I need to look at is patience, because I'm going to be talking about some characteristics here, and I just picked out some, like patience, love, faith, humility, obedience, sacrifice, faith, I said faith already. Okay, endurance. So these are some just characteristics that I wonder, did someone out in the hallway thought I was talking too loud? They just closed the door. The kitchen people didn't want to hear what I had to say. Well, anyway, so we are going to just look through those, but when I look through them, me personally, patience is the one for me, okay? And so I'm just going to take that one and just kind of walk through it just a little bit. So how is that? So how does patience is worked around surroundings? Well, it sure makes a difference where I am. Like if I'm in the grocery store, the doctor's office, at home, church, in the car, with friends, at another friend's house, it sure makes a difference to how I feel. And sometimes I don't do too well there. So if I'm all by myself, I do pretty good. But if I'm waiting for somebody, I don't do very well. I'm not very good about being patient, like if I'm waiting for somebody for lunch and they're late. Or if I'm waiting for my own kids to come to my house to eat Thanksgiving dinner at 12:30. Because that's when I scheduled it to be done. So, when you get to be my age, maybe you say 12:30, but it's really 1 o'clock. So, those things affect the surroundings, kind of affect where we are. All right, the other thing that affects us are our past experiences. What you've been through before makes a difference about how you react to that test at that time. It makes a difference if you've been through similar, same old, you think the outcome is going to be this way because you have had some of those experiences in the past. It might be a friend that you trusted, and now it's kind of hard to trust, right? It might be theta care. This week, my husband happens to have prostate cancer, and he went through some radiation. And okay, so now the bills come, right? So there's a bill from last July that I've asked about since November, and then I asked December and in January, and they go, oh, no worry. And they have a cancer navigator, which means that they are supposed to make sure that theta care is paid. And she said, oh, it's all settled. Everything is good. Monday, I have never gotten a collection letter, but the Lord was going to put me down on Monday. Green it was. It said a collection from Theta Care, $463. I took a deep breath. I wrote her an email because I was a bit more controlled. I said that to say that I was angry was putting it mildly. But I did sign it as ever. Then what did I do? I called her. So she never returned my email and she didn't call me. Tuesday, I'm like huffing. So I call the billing department and ask them what's going on, and I said, I understand that the insurance company was audited and you put in the wrong code. My husband is not a new patient. He was there in 2014. Oh, yes. Well, yes, I see that. Yes, we did send that in. Yes, and no, the no, that's been taken back. Really? I got it in the mail. Well, anyway, so then I had to call the collection agency, which I've never done in my life. And she said, oh, that's all been taken care of. So yes, I was tested this week, and totally unnecessary, guys. I didn't need it, and I failed. But I was able to accept the woman's apology, and I will attempt to trust Theta Care again. So sometimes we have just little tests, you know? Little tests like waiting in line. That isn't too bad, depending upon where you, well, we've got people waiting in line right now. It's not too bad, depending upon where you are in line, right? All right. Or waiting for a package to be delivered. That's not too bad, especially when the tracking number, says it's supposed to come in the afternoon by 4 o'clock, and, it's 6 o'clock and it's not there yet. You've had that happen too. So some of those are just little tests, like waiting for water to boil, right? Waiting for the washer to stop. So you can put it in the dryer. So those are just little tests, but you know what? Those tests are getting you ready for the big tests that God has in store for you. Those big tests. And we've all had some of those big tests. It might be like waiting to recover from surgery, waiting to get that cast off, waiting for the answer to a critical question, waiting for your son or daughter to return to faith, waiting for a grandchild to be baptized without you doing it yourself, waiting for God to come back and take us home. All of those long waiting, those little tests are getting us ready for the big tests. So, why does God test us? Well, James tells us this. I think it's on your sheet too. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Well, I got the mature part, but I don't think I'm complete. That's one of the things that happens. You get older, you learn a few things, but you don't learn it all, believe me. And I always say that anybody on their deathbed is preaching their last sermon. And I pray that my last sermon will bring someone to Christ, that I maintain and hold on to my Lord and Savior. So, looking at your test, how long does God test us? Joseph's going for a while. How long have you been tested? Write it down. It might be your age, or if you put it next to health, it might have been the last 5 years, right? Or if you're in school, for some, that's a test. Yep, long. Or you're waiting for your children to mature. Sometimes I'm still waiting for that with some of them. I won't tell you how old they are. All right. They're probably waiting for me to be the best mom ever. All right. So there are things that God tests us, and how long has it been? And some of it has been long. Our faith is tested so it might grow, because God wants it to increase. He wants it to grow strong, and He wants it to mature. That's what He wants to happen. And you don't go from here to there. You don't. And besides, I want to tell you this little thing. You know, I said this probably last time. Everybody has stuff. Everybody. Some of it you can see. Oh yeah, she got picked up. And some of you can't see. Some of it you can't see. Maybe they're dealing with anxiety and have been taking medication for years, but they're not going to tell you that. There are things that you can't see that people are suffering. So sin does not skip over anyone. Not anyone. So, just as a little aside, because sometimes I think we think that the grass is greener on the other side, but as Dr. Dawson said, it has to be mowed over there too. So, God's tests are hard, and I'm going to talk about 6 different areas and the reasons why He tests. And I want you to think during this time about the testing that you've had and whether some of it has gone into this area. So, God tests our character and our integrity. Like, do we lovingly obey Him? Is He first in our life? So, character and integrity. You hear these big words, and we've talked about some characteristics. Well, characteristics are kind of molded into what integrity is. And, excuse me, if you have good integrity, you don't need to worry about your reputation, because it's built on your character and your integrity. So, let's talk about Joseph for just a little bit. All right, now there was somebody, you know, I sometimes think about him, you know, when he's in Egypt and obedient and whatever. But think about this. 11th child, or 11th son, I should say. The firstborn of the woman that Jacob loved, right, Rachel? And he's having a dream, and he announces it to his 10 older brothers. Guess what? I'm going to rule over you someday. And he says it in this nice, colorful coat. Oh, you know they were mad. You know they were mad. And in fact, Jacob couldn't even hardly believe that he was going to rule over everybody. It didn't make any sense. But he was going to rule over everyone. So, what does Jacob do to kind of set him up? He sends him to check on his brothers. Great. We've done that, haven't we? Those of you that are mothers, you have sent another child to check up on somebody. Just remember Joseph in that process. Okay. So anyway, he was sent to check up on his brothers, and they saw him coming, and they decided, well, they thought, let's kill him. And then Reuben said, oh, let's just put him in a pit. And that's what they did. They put him in the pit. And then Reuben left, but Judah said, hey, look at this. Here are these Midianite traders coming down, going to Egypt. Let's sell them. That's what they did. So how's that going for you? You're going to rule over everything, and now you're a slave. Well, when he got to Egypt then, and I'm just going to talk about how this affected Joseph, and I'm not going to say all these other things about his life. So he got to Egypt, and Potiphar looks at these slaves, and he chooses Joseph. So 17 years old Joseph is now. And he works for Potiphar, and he does such a great job that Potiphar puts him head over all of the slaves. But with that, this guy was a pretty good-looking guy. And Potiphar's wife thought, ooh, he does look good. And I think I would like to have him for my lover, right? But he didn't want to have anything to do with it at all. But there was just one little thing that happened. She was able to grab his coat. So when she talked to Potiphar, of course, she says that he was going to rape her. And she has the coat. And so Potiphar reacts. Prison. So now how's that working for you? Slave and you're in prison. You're still not ruling over anyone, are you? So he's there, and while Joseph is there's the cupbearer, and there's also the baker. They have dreams. And Joseph said, hey, I can tell you what those dreams are about. So the cupbearer was told his dream, and the baker was told his dream, and in 3 days these things were going to happen. So Joseph said, hey, remember me when you go to Pharaoh. But that didn't happen. Years passed. So how's that going for you? Slave, you're in prison, and years are passing, and you're still not over anyone. But God has his plan. Pharaoh has a dream, actually 2 dreams. And in that dream, he can't interpret it. But the cupbearer says, hey, I know somebody. So that's what happens. The cupbearer comes, tells Pharaoh the dream, and then Pharaoh said, hey, I need somebody to take over this 7 years of plenty. So we will have plenty during the famine years. And that's what happened. So was he elevated? Yes. At last. 13 years. 13 years before that happened. And of course the rest is history. We're not going to go into that. But I just wanted to show you that Joseph's belief that God would make him ruler over and was faithful during that time. We're not talking about as a kid. So at a 17-year-old, he wasn't ready to be in charge, but now he was. So it reveals our character, and it also reveals our integrity. So, in fact, in Romans it says, not only this, but we also rejoice confidently in sufferings, because we know that suffering produces patient endurance. And patient endurance produces tested character, and tested character produces hope, and hope will not put us to shame, because God's love has poured out into our hearts by the Holy Spirit. There were 3 other fellows that were also tested, and they literally were in the fire of affliction: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I'm not going to tell you the whole story of that. I'm just going to say this. It wasn't that they couldn't do it. It wasn't that they couldn't bow down to this statue. They wouldn't do it. So their faith was strong. They believed, and they were saved. So the second thing, the first thing was character and integrity. What else is God testing? He's testing to reveal what is presently in our hearts, whether good or bad. And I put down Simon Peter. There's an impulsive guy for you, right? So Peter chose this in, I think of him as ADHD, right? His heart was there. He was filled with love, but boy, he just said whatever came into his mind. I can do it, I can this, I can that. So, if you think about it, as Jesus worked with him, it wasn't until the end. So what happened during that time? Well, easy. He walked on water and sunk, right? He fell asleep in the garden. He denied Jesus 3 times. He cut off Malchus' ear, right? But he gave the most fabulous sermon in the New Testament. In fact, 3,000 converts that day. So God used him. Jesus asked him at the end of John 3 times, "Do you love me?" Now, when you think about it, perfect for his character, right? Because by the 3rd time, his answer was this: "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." But that's what he does to us too. You know, you might know right off the bat, but the 3rd time is sort of pricking at you a little bit, how you might answer and not be angry. All right. So, fire tests the purity of silver and gold, but a person is tested by being praised. And if you're wondering about that, think about the Super Bowl, will you? Now, I didn't care who won either side. But you got one that is praising the Lord, and the other one is pouting because he doesn't have enough rings and hasn't won enough football Super Bowls. Right? Now, that's what God says. Fire tests the purity of silver and gold, but a person is tested by being praised. So, that's why we're humble sometimes. We're made to be humble, right? I just got to check my time here. All right. One of the other things that happens is that we find out whether or not we do things for God's glory or for the praise of others. We do things for God's glory or we do it for the praise of others. Well, I have Paul down here, but I'm going to talk about Abigail for a little while. Do you know that she's one of the most wonderful role models in the Old Testament? Yeah, she was married to a wealthy, wicked old man. I shouldn't say he's old. Well, he didn't make it that far, did he? He died. But he's a wealthy, wicked man. Now, some of you say Nabal's, it's novel. I don't know. One of those. Didn't have any phonics, so one-room school, you know. Sometimes that can be a problem. All right, so it says that David was anointed king, but wasn't king yet. So David went to, sent some men to Nabal and said, you know, would you give us some hospitality? And he said, no. The messengers went back to David, and David was enraged. He had helped his shepherds and had helped him keep his flocks. And what do you mean he won't give us any hospitality? And all this time, then Abigail hears this. What does she do? She prepares a big feast. And she meets David to try to save her family because she knows the future king is angry. So she feeds the men, and she's able to calm David down, and he goes back without injuring Nabal. Now, while all this was happening, Nabal was so proud of himself. He had rejected David. Let's party and drink, which is what they did. So when Abigail got back, they were all drunk. So in the morning, she told them, you know what, I just saved you from 400 soldiers coming in here and destroying all of this. But what happened to Nabal? His heart was hardened. And he died within a few days, 10 I think it was. But in all of this, David hears this, he sends for her, and she becomes David's wife. But this is a woman that had courage to face a king's anointed king, but not king yet, to talk to him without being fearful about what might happen. God gave that woman courage, and I think she's a good role model for us too to remember. All right, so we talked about character and integrity. We talked about I have to where our heart is at the present time, and we find out who are we going to praise. Are we going to praise God or man? Well, one of them there is Paul. This is the part where Paul brags. And you have to understand that little what's happening there a little bit. Paul is bragging because the Corinthians are bragging. And so it's sort of like this. One of them. Let's call it that. And so Paul says, well, I'm a fool. Think of me as a fool, while they're bragging about all kinds of things. And this is what he says. 5 times I received from the Jews 40 lashes minus 1. By the way, the reason they did 39 was they didn't ever want to go over 40, and so they thought if they did 39, they'd not break that law. All right? I know. But 3 times I was beaten with rods. 1 time I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day on the open sea, and he's not even dead yet. I've been on journeys, in danger in rivers, in danger from robbers, in danger from my own people, in danger from Gentiles, in danger from the city, in danger in the wilderness, in danger in the sea, in danger among false brothers. I have worked hard and struggled, and I've spent sleepless nights. Well, this I've done. I've been hungry and thirsty, and I've gone without food many times. Well, not too many times. And I've been cold and lacked clothing. So what he says during this time then, he's just reminding them, I've done all of this, and when I brag about this, I'm a fool. What you need to do is brag in the Lord and what he's done for you. That's what we should be doing, or I should be doing, is brag in the Lord what he has done for me. The reason I changed that is one of the things that sometimes happens to us when we're talking to other people is we generalize. We should not do this, or they should not that. So you're able to remove yourself to the side, and you're not really affected unless you say, I need to this. Then you're being upfront and honest with yourself. But when you're saying we this, or they that, or us, what do you mean us? Me. I need to change. I'm the one. You're the one that needs to change. It's a little bit like, you probably experienced this. Somebody got really sick, and maybe they were just diagnosed with cancer, and you want to say something to them, and so you do. But then you just can't hardly help saying, you know, my next door neighbor had this same thing, and then blah, 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 blah. And I want to tell you that the person that is experiencing the pain or that trial doesn't care if your neighbor had it. They don't care. They want you to listen. Okay, I did fall down at LWMS, and I broke my tibia and fibula, and yes, I was laid up for 3 months. So people came to visit me. Okay. 2 questions about myself. You know, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing pretty good, right? Now, I knew not really quite listening. And some other question. The rest of the 20 minutes was about them. Really? Are we doing that to our friends? Are we doing that to our neighbors? Are we talking about ourselves? And we should be listening to what they're saying. So stop using we should. No, I need to is what you need to do. And the same thing is when you say, I am praying for you. Then right there, pray. Right there, grab them in your arms and hug them and whisper in their ear a prayer. Right then and there. Because you know what? You'll go home and, well, maybe if you put their name on your prayer list, maybe not. So it doesn't mean as much as right then and right there. Just a couple of things that I learned from my own experience of things that have happened. Okay, back to the fourth thing. It says, to produce fruits of patience leading to sanctification and conformity to Christ. In other words, how are we working on that? All right, so Ruth was a Moabite, a Gentile no less. And God uses Ruth. So, we had Naomi and her husband, Elimelech. And there was a famine in Judah. And so they decided to go to Moab with their 2 sons. They were there about 10 years. And while they were there, Elimelech dies. So now it's Naomi and her 2 sons. And they marry. They marry Orpah, which by the way, you know that is what Orpah was supposed to be named. But they made a mistake switching the letters around. Yeah. So Orpah, and for whatever reason did I tell you that? None. You'll go home and you say, you know what she said? Anyway, so Orpah and Ruth. All right, so they married her sons, and her sons died. So now, usually the mother has more children, is supposed to have more children, or has more children, and then the daughter-in-laws would marry those sons. But Naomi said, oh, I'm too old for that, and I'm not having any children, and she's kind of mad, actually, that all of this happened. So she says to her daughter-in-laws, you know, you go back and, you know, live with your parents, maybe remarry again, and Naomi is going to leave, and Orpah goes. But Ruth said, no, those famous lines, you know, wherever you go, I will go. And so she goes with her. And they go back to Judah. And they are in an area around Bethlehem where there's land. And Boaz owns some of that. And Boaz is related to Elimelech. So he knows about Naomi, and he has heard about Ruth. So Ruth said, hey, you know, I'm going to go out in the field and gather some grain so that we can eat. And so she did, just around the edges of the crop. And any of you that are farmer gals, you know that when the combine comes around the corner, they don't go like this. And then there's always this, like, triangle. So I envision it something like that, even though I know they didn't have a combine. They didn't go around that corner. That's how I envision it in my eye. Okay, so she gathered that grain, and when Boaz saw her, he said, oh, leave more, so that they'll have plenty. So when she gets home, Naomi gives her these instructions, which Ruth followed. She said, you know, Boaz is going to be in the thrashing floor tonight, thrashing barley, and then he's going to eat and drink, and then he's going to lay down. And when he does, I want you to go. I don't want you to show yourself to him, but I want you to go in where he's laying down, and I want you to lay down by his feet. And she did that. And during the middle of the night, he saw her, and she said, you know, you are my redeemer. In other words, you're a relative. So he thought, you know, he had one other guy that might be interested in her, but he was so happy to find out that guy wasn't interested. So he married her. But what a patient woman she was. And she ends up being in the genealogy of our Lord and Savior. So she had Obed, who had Jesse, who had David. So Ruth, the Gentile Moabite, is part of Christ's genealogy. Some of you knew that, of course, but that's okay. I probably am a little bit of a Ruth myself in this way. Not like I laid down at the feet of Dennis. I didn't. How did that come up? Okay. any predecessors that had gone to Nuam or had gone to the seminary or had gone to Northwestern College. And yet here I am today. So it doesn't make any difference. You don't, some of you who are thinking that you have to follow in these footsteps, anyone can. It is available to anyone. I need to take a drink, I'm sorry. And it's water. And I'm watching my time because I know you people want to eat. All right. One of the other things that God tests is He tests to reveal and show faithfulness, mercies, love, and comfort to His people. And that is what happens to you, that you can show and talk about that. I put Esther down here. She had a lot of sacrifices that she had to make to save her own people, and she was willing to do it. She was willing to do it. And in a foreign country, no less, with risks of being killed and risks of Mordecai, her uncle, being killed. But she took the risks because she loved her people and because God was there for such a time as this, right? And she was able to save her people by that loving mercy that God showed His people through Esther, being brave enough to ask the king to save her people. And then, of course, we have, I think this one I have to tell you about. I'm skipping a couple of references, just people. Jael is her name, Jael. She was in Judges 4, and Deborah was the judge, the one-woman judge. And it was the Israelites that were trying to fight King Jabin of Canaan. And they were chasing after them, and there was a captain whose name was, I have to look at it, remember, no phonics, Sisera. So Sisera noticed they were losing the battle. So what does he do? Runs. And that's what he did. He's running to escape, and he comes to the tent, and Jael sees him, and she invites him in. Boy, that was risky, right? She invites him in, and he was tired and thirsty, and so she said, "Would you like some milk?" Now, ladies, you know what milk does, right? It makes you tired. It makes you tired, and that's exactly what happened. He laid down to sleep. Now, this is the gory part. Yes, she did leave the tent, and she got a peg stake, and she got a mallet, and then she went back in, and, well, yes, she killed him. However, I want you to think about it like this. She was saving her people. This is the same man that was ready to destroy the Israelites. And so God used a woman to take care of that. That she had the courage. I don't know if I would have had the courage to kill him like that, but she did because, well, her people's life was at stake. So that's how God shows His faithfulness, His mercy, love, and comfort to His people. He used her. The last, let me see. I don't want to skip over anything. To keep us on the path to heaven, where we will receive the crown of life. And one of those that were asked to be kept on the path of heaven was actually Elijah. Elijah was a prophet during Ahab, and Ahab was a wicked king. He was king over Israel, not Judah, so they had already separated their kingdoms. And so he was king over Israel. But his wife was worse. It was Jezebel. So Elijah was a prophet during this time, and he's talking to Ahab, and he said, I know that we've had a famine for 6 months, but it's going to be another 3 years. And then he quickly leaves. And the Lord sends him to the brook Chinnereth. And those of you that have had Sunday school, can you not see the brook and then the really sad tree that comes up, and then you see Elijah, and you see the ravens coming with bread and food, and he has the brook to feed him. So the Lord took care of him. But then the brook dried up. So then he sent him to Zarephath. And there the famine was still going on. He met a widow, and she had oil and flour to make one last meal for her son and herself. And he said, okay, but I'll tell you that you will have oil until the end of the famine and flour till the end of the famine if you give me some of that bread first. And she did. Now that's trust. She did. And she was able to survive that famine. So the other thing then, probably the thing that he's known for the biggest, is when he challenges the prophets of Baal. Oh yeah. They're on Mount Carmel. And he gathers the people together. By the way, I was there and I thought, how did those people hear all this? You know, God can work miracles, so I'm thinking, must have been something like that. I mean, it is a long way from here to the plains where all the people were. So, up on the hill, or up on the mountain they are. And so, the challenge that Elijah gives is, all right, let's see whose God is going to consume this all. Oh, the prophets of Baal said, sure. All day they work. They even cut themselves. Nothing happened. And so now it is Elijah's turn. So he takes the bull, he takes 12 stones and he rebuilds the altar that was once God's. And he puts wood on it and he puts the cut up bull on top. And then he pours water over the whole thing, like 12 jars of water. And then he calls on God in a 63-word prayer. And boom! Comes down, destroys it all, including the rocks, and burns everything up. Then they said, yes, we will honor God. This is the same man that God took to heaven in a chariot. So, we know that. There are a couple of things then that we are to look at. Our character and integrity he tests. He tests where our heart's at. He tests whether or not we're putting him first and giving him glory. Or are we looking for the praise and them? He's testing to see how much patience we have and how much we are going to give him the honor when he gives us mercy, comfort. He's also trying to keep us on the path to heaven. Now, I know that it's not like a straight road. It's more like a river that goes like this, And sometimes we go up a tributary and then come back down and find out it goes nowhere. And then we come back. But that's just part of life. That's what makes it an adventure. God's life is God's working with us is an adventure. So, what happens in our life? Well, I'll tell you a couple stories about having to stand up for what you believe in. I was in grade school, and I had a teacher in a one-room school, and there were 18 of us, and I was in 7th grade, and the teacher was teaching us the 100th Psalm. Now, this was a public school. Okay, I was in confirmation instruction, and so I said something to my pastor, okay, and he said, well, that's putting church and state together. I know. So he said, why don't you sit down? And my parents encouraged me to do the same thing. After all, I had a few cousins there, right? That's what I did the next time. I was just sweating. And you know what? She asked me, and I said, we believe in separation of church and state. And that was the end of it. Something happens again now. I'm in high school. I'm in a public high school. And in this high school, I'm in speech and debate, and I'm in plays, so people know who I am, and not that I'm the most popular person. By no means, I'm a plow jockey, remember? I came in from the farm to the big city, 12,000 people. Okay, so in this, they have a baccalaureate service. Okay, so everybody's supposed to go to this on Sunday, and my pastor encouraged me to not go. I didn't go. And I thought, okay, that's over with. No. The principal calls me into the office and asks me why I wasn't there. I'm like, what? Separation of church and state is what I said. Oh, okay. 2 times. I'm like, Lord, what? But you're tested in ways that are like a surprise. You weren't expecting that kind of thing. You weren't. And I hope it doesn't happen again. Just saying. All right. So in Hebrews, we have plenty of things that we can look at that gives us an idea about obeying God and paying attention to Him. Excuse me. I'm on the last part there. I played with some things here. Some of you have taken an ACT and maybe you've taken it more than once, or maybe you didn't. Makes no difference. But it is a test. So it's an actions cultivate trust. An SAT is stumbles activate trust. And test outcomes, well, training enhancement safeguards trust, or training enhancement stops trust. Some people are done when they've been tested. You've heard people say, why would God let this happen to me? Why not? Why not? Do you think you're privileged to have the first jet out of here? No. If it was, I'd be on it. But no, you're not. You're not privileged. In fact, we have a number of different tests that we take in school. We have taken true or false tests, right? Well, if you read too much into it, you get it wrong, don't you? You think, well, is it this or this? Instead of just your first instinct. Or multiple choice. Well, at least 2 are bad. So then you got to choose between a couple. Oh, fill in the blank. That's not bad if they furnish all the words. Oh, yeah. And then there's the essay test. You got to know a few facts to throw in there to show that you know what you're doing. I wonder what Hartwick thought when I wrote those tests in Western civilization. I've never had it in my life. So, and then of course we have the open book test. I don't need to study for this. I got the book. But you got to know where the answers are. You've got to know where the answers are. So, no matter how tough it gets, God is always there. No matter how bad it gets, He keeps His promises. And no matter how bad it gets, He is always there and working till whatever happens to you is for your eternal good. Because God doesn't give standardized tests. He gives a test where we say, God's tests are hard, but the answers are in the book. Thank you.